The wheels are only ever driven by an electric motor, and that means that we can control the engine that's generating the electricity separately to the driving speed and the acceleration. But we've also added another technology, which is active noise cancellation. So very similar to the headphones that you use on the aeroplane, we have a speaker in the luggage room of the car that will play the inverse noise to the engine and cancel it out. So when you're driving around the city, the engine can start and stop, and you won't even notice it's happening.
Past 6. Regions on Comet Watch and clarification around pipeline upgrades. Good morning, Oliver Brown with ABC News. A well-known outback amateur astronomer says some regional residents could witness the brightest comet in a generation. Broken Hill's Trevor Barry says if C2026 A1 MAPS hasn't disintegrated over the weekend, the comet should be visible to the naked eye later this week. He says observers should find an unobstructed view of the western horizon just after sunset on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday for the best chance to catch a glimpse.
I shouldn't oversell it, but people are saying we could be seeing the brightest comet of our generation. Now, it might not happen because it might not have survived flying through the sun's corona, but it doesn't take much effort to wander outside and you just might see something you remember for the rest of your life.
SA Water says there'll be no interruptions to drinking water for more than 130,000 homes in regional South Australia, despite more than $60 million worth of upgrades being done on a pipeline between Morgan to Whyalla. The 358-kilometre pipeline supplies water from the Murraylands to the mid-north York Peninsula and Eyre Peninsula. SA Water's Peter Selskis says it needs general maintenance after 80 years in service. He says work on the project should be completed by the end of 2027.
The work that we're doing, we're constructing a new pipe next to the pipe that we will be replacing, and we will eventually connect the two pipes together. This pipeline moves bulk water, and we'll do that in a way to ensure the pipeline construction won't impact water supply.
SA Police are searching for a man swept into floodwaters in the state's far north. They say Tony, aged 65, was last seen about 12:30 on Saturday afternoon on Cordillo Downs Road at Inaminka. Police say Tony is Caucasian, around 156 centimetres tall with a slim build, and ask anyone who sees him to call 131 444. The Timber Furniture Textiles Union says a deal to save Mount Gambier's Bedford Mill will benefit the whole town, not just workers. The state government has announced more than $2 million in funding for the Disability Trust to buy the mill to avoid it being liquidated. The government says the move saves dozens of jobs for people living with a disability. Union organiser Travis Lawson says he doesn't think of the government's grant as a handout, but as an investment.
When we work locally, a lot of our money we spend locally, so most certainly it's the right decision to make. We don't view it as a waste of money, and the people that are cheering and applauding on site don't view it as a waste of money.
A man has been charged following a 160-kilometre police pursuit in far west New South Wales. Bill Ormond reports.
Police were carrying out roadside breath testing in Broken Hill on Saturday night when the driver of a sedan allegedly ignored the direction of officers to pull over. Police pursued the vehicle on the Barrier Highway, alleging it reached speeds of up to 180 kilometres per hour. The vehicle drove a further 160 kilometres east towards Wilcannia before road spikes were deployed. Police say the driver, a 32-year-old man, ran into the bush before being arrested a short time later. A 34-year-old woman, a 14-year-old girl and a 7-month-old baby were passengers in the car. All were uninjured. The man has been refused bail.
Researchers say community music programs are a powerful tool to improve well-being for young people in regional areas. A study from Edith Cowan University looked at after-school programs that included sharing a meal, jamming and healthy life lessons. Dr. Jason Goopy says the sessions are important for bringing together people who might otherwise be isolated. He says community music programs need to be supported in the national cultural policy.
We believe that arts and music education in particular need stronger and more visible support through this policy that will then have whole of government initiatives flow from that.
The federal government says the policy is committed to supporting specialist in-school arts education programs and recognises the program's wellbeing benefits for young people. A spokesperson says the government provided a boost of $115 million over 4 years in the 2024-25 budget, and the nation's premier arts training organisations will receive more than $36 million annually beginning in 2028.
A group of Mount Gambier locals have put in an application for state heritage protection to prevent the demolition of the old flour mill walls on the corner of Sturt Street and Bay Road. The demolition of the local heritage listed structure was approved by the Limestone Coast Southern Regional Assessment Panel last month, with the walls to make way for a housing and commercial precinct. Mount Gambier local Ockett LaRue says people are willing to try all options to keep the 140-year-old dolomite walls standing.
Once this building is gone, it's gone forever. And that's a decision that deserves the highest level of scrutiny. And therefore, we would go to the extreme lengths that we are going. And it's only when we reach that very end that we will concede.
Chair of the South Australian Heritage Council, Sandy Forshaw, says state heritage applications are assessed on their significance to the whole state rather than local communities.
The difficulty for us is to be able to process in a time frame that makes a difference. It might meet the local heritage criteria in terms of it's important to that town, but it might not meet the state heritage criteria.
The state government has been contacted for comment. The state government says it will be watching how the Iran war affects the cost of new housing. The government's housing target aims for 13,500 new homes each year, about 600 more than were built last year. Housing Minister Nick Champion says he's confident the government can still meet the target, but cautioned about the impact of the war.
Confident that we'll have anything like a normal environment, then we'll be able to get there. And obviously, these complexities in the world, the war is not a normal construct. So we have to wait and see how that all flows through the economy.
Newly elected members of South Australia's Voice to Parliament have called for an apology, claiming some voters experienced delays and felt racially judged at polling places. More than 3,500 First Nations people voted in last month's Voice election, which was held on the same day as the state election. Central Region Voice member Asham Owen says some voters felt culturally unsafe when they were questioned by electoral officers.
They identified themselves as Aboriginal and said to the staff that they were voting in this Voice election, and they kind of questioned that. They said, "Are you sure this is for Aboriginal people?" Some people then received really, I think, unwarranted, unsolicited commentary about Aboriginal history.
The Electoral Commission says it's very concerned to hear about the claims and would look into the matters. An expert says an increase in prey may be behind a rise in shark sightings along the Limestone coast in recent months. A great white shark was reportedly spotted off the coast of Robe over the Easter long weekend, with more than half a dozen sightings in the region so far this year. Flinders University professor Charlie Huveniers says it's impossible to know if the increased sightings mean a growing population. He says there's much more awareness and information on sightings now than in the past.
I think that the best thing that people can do is keep trying to be aware of where these sightings occurs and take those into consideration, but also think about the different mitigation measures that are available.
The City of Mount Gambier says community sentiment on the controversial cast in blue sculpture is shifting as more people embrace the landmark. The $136,000 sculpture has attracted international headlines after local woman Amelia Vanderhorst superglued googly eyes to it in September. Riddoch Arts and Cultural Centre Director Ashley Watling says the artwork has boosted tourism in the city.
Every time I go outside, I see somebody having a photo with it, or I see a kid having a cuddle, or I see somebody just giving it a questioning stare. So I definitely think it's doing its job in terms of attracting people to the CBD.
Adelaide University Associate Professor of Contemporary Art Gretchen Coombs says public art controversies are common, but it can be effective for growing visitation.
Sometimes over time, because of controversy, attitudes change. They begin to embrace it because it becomes a part of the local identity, and people become really proud of that. And I think Castamou is a good example of that.
Planned strike action at the Mount Gambier Hospital has been postponed just hours before some staff were set to walk off the job. United Workers Union staff, which included staff in patient services, catering and cleaning, were set to stop work for 1 hour from 8:45 this morning. The union said concerns over psychological harm and complaints being glossed over by hospital management and being minimised had forced the action. But after negotiations late yesterday, the industrial action has been postponed. One of Australia's leading public policy economists is calling for the federal government to consider means testing NDIS funding. The NDIS is growing at a rate of around 10% per annum and is expected to cost $50 billion this financial year. Ahead of the federal budget in May, Professor Robert Brunig from the Australian National University says the government should explore means testing to help ensure the scheme remains sustainable into the future.
Introduce some kind of means testing. That is a feature of most of Australia's support that we give to people. With the NDIS, we are giving quite a bit of money away to very wealthy families. To be clear, there is a myth out there that somehow wealthy people get the NDIS more than people that aren't wealthy. We don't find that in our data.
A company converting diesel trucks to electric says the heavy vehicle sector will need government assistance to speed up the transition from fossil fuels. Janus Electric converted a fennel forestry truck as part of a trial that ran for 2.5 years. However, Fennel Forestry has since parked the vehicle, finding it wasn't economically viable due to charging and infrastructure costs. But Janus Electric's Ben Hutt says electrification is benefiting transport companies at larger scales.
From our perspective, we know that they love the truck, had a great time with the truck. I think there's lots of fleet operators at the moment trying to push the government to subsidise the cost of converting trucks and providing the infrastructure.
The South Australian government says it's not considering additional changes to firearm legislation after agreeing to a federal government crackdown in the wake of the Bondi terror attack last year. Jackson Byrne reports.
The state government says additional gun reform, including a buyback scheme, is not currently on the table, and it would need to undertake extensive and genuine consultation before implementing further changes. The federal government previously set a target to have a buyback plan in place no later than the beginning of July, but more than half the states and territories, including SA, are still opposed to parts of the plan. A spokesperson for the state government says South Australia already has some of the strongest firearm laws in Australia, which are now the model for the rest of the country.
BirdLife Australia is looking for volunteers to help it count southeastern red-tailed black cockatoos in the region. The annual count will take place in May, aiming to track the numbers and distribution of the birds in the southeast. They're found in stringy bark forests in areas along the South Australia and Victoria border from Keith to Mount Gambier. Project coordinator Rachel Farron says getting the community involved has helped understand the birds' current numbers.
So the reason these birds are endangered is because quite a large lot of their habitat's been cleared. They're specialist feeders that only feed on 3 species of trees. So part of the count is raising awareness to get people to protect the habitat that the birds rely on.
The director of Drake Supermarkets says he's seeing suppliers charging more for groceries in response to rising prices of fuel and other supplies sourced from the Middle East. JP Drake says the supermarket chain has the ability to absorb price changes and won't increase the cost of groceries. However, he says he wants more clarity from the federal government about fuel supply and prices.
Until we can't, we are holding down the prices. We're absorbing that at this point in time and have absorbed it for the last 4 weeks. All we're asking for from the government is some transparency. The fact that people are panic buying is all because we don't have that certainty.
The owner of a farm in the southeast has been fined $84,000 for illegal land clearing, much less than it would have cost him if the work had been approved. Eugene Boisvert has more.
70-year-old Daniel John Malloy and his company Treetops Estate Proprietary Limited pleaded guilty in the Environment Resources and Development Court to clearing 112 hectares of bushland at Tintinara in 2023. The court heard Malloy decided to clear more than 600 trees on his farm after falling limbs killed 2 bulls, 1 cow and a lamb. In sentencing, Judge Michael Durant said Malloy was aware that permits for clearing the trees would have cost more than $2.2 million if approved. The court also handed Malloy a conviction.
The union representing Mount Gambier Hospital doctors says its health and safety dispute with management hasn't been resolved 10 months after it was raised. The Salaried Medical Officers Association lodged the dispute with the Employment Tribunal in June 2025, citing psychosocial hazards. The United Workers Union, which represents other staff, planned to walk off the job yesterday due to similar issues, but paused the action after negotiations with management. SASMOA's Bernadette Mulholland says intervention is needed.
It's really concerning that we're having these ongoing health and safety issues, not just us but other unions. It should not be workers who have to highlight or go to this extent to raise issues around psychosocial issues. It should be proactively addressed by the employer.
The state government says it has no power to protect a Mount Gambier wall under state heritage consideration, despite plans to demolish it. Samuel O'Brien reports.
Mossop Construction was approved to demolish the locally heritage-listed wall last month to make way for a commercial housing and hotel precinct on the corner of Sturt Street and Bay Road. Ockett LaRue says he and others who want to keep the wall have made an application for state heritage listing to prevent demolition. He says an emergency protection order hasn't been issued while the application is assessed.
We have made a formal approach to the Minister for Climate, Environment and Water, Emily Burke. We requested the Minister to reconsider the decision.
The spokesperson says the Minister has no powers under the Heritage Places Act to intervene.
The SANT Motor Trade Association says it welcomes the state government's fast-track changes to heavy vehicle limits as a way to ease fuel consumption. Under the new rules, maximum vehicle weight limits have increased and tri-drive rigid trucks and prime movers are allowed on more roads. MTA General Manager Case Seleson says it will allow for more efficient transportation and could ease the fuel demand.
South Australia's moves does follow other moves in other states to relax or provide greater flexibility for the transport operators to move goods around the country.
The Department for Environment and Water says duck numbers in SA may be lower as birds head north to wetter parts of the country. The state's duck hunting season opened earlier this month with a slightly increased bag limit of 8 ducks per hunting day. While most of the state's game reserves are open, Bull Lagoon in the southeast and Marook in the Riverland are closed. The department's Lysian Lone says hunters have been complying with the rules, but early reports suggest there's fewer birds around.
Anecdotally, it seems like a lot of ducks might have headed north because of the significant rainfall. So a lot of the ducks and other water birds seem to be amazing at sensing rainfall in other parts of the country.
And one of Australia's peak farming bodies is calling on the government to tweak rules around the use of a controlled substance that can be used as fertiliser. Ammonium nitrate can be used as fertiliser, but it's heavily regulated and can be used to make explosives and poses a security risk. Fertiliser Australia CEO Stephen Annals says the conflict in the Middle East is severely blocking urea fertiliser supply. He says the organisation's calling for the government to lift sanctions to allow Russia to sell urea to Australia, as well as easing restrictions on ammonium nitrate.
We are also seeking the federal government's assistance on that to see how we can not relax those rules but shape those rules such that growers can access that source of nitrogen. It's not going to fill the full void that getting urea from the Gulf would have.
The Murraylands, Riverland and South East regions have received the results of this year's South Australian Voice to Parliament election. Shannon Pearce reports.
12 candidates nominated for the positions, including all previously elected members. River Murray Mallee Aboriginal Corporation Director Cheryl Giles was re-elected to her position alongside Rob Wright, who was also a presiding member for the State Voice. Nyaranjerry Aboriginal Corporation Director Tim Hartman from the Murraylands, educator Lisa Rigney and Danny Smith from the South East, another state presiding member, were also successfully re-elected. Malcolm Aston and Stephanie Russell will be part of the region's Voice to Parliament for the first time. 390 formal votes were received for the region.
A Limestone Coast mother says wait times to access childcare services in the region are putting a strain on families financially and emotionally. Bridget Johnson enrolled her daughter at the Lucendale Rural Care Facility when she was about 12 weeks pregnant, but found out there would likely not be a place for her until 2028, when her daughter would be entering kindergarten. Ms Johnson says she has had to pay out of pocket for a private nanny to look after her daughter a couple days a week so she can help run her family's business.
I do most of my work when my husband gets home from work from 5 to 10 at night. Private nanny costs us about $38 an hour, which is a huge financial burden, but is what we need to do to keep our family running.
A former Robe councillor is calling for a memorial to commemorate the life and work of Robe sculptor and artist Patricia Mosley, who passed away last month. Born in the 1940s, Pat Mosley grew up near Keith and became a Fellow of the Royal South Australian Society of Arts. Among her works is a bronze bust of suffragette Mary Lee on North Terrace in Adelaide, as well as busts of explorers Borden and Flinders at Robe and an outback mailman Tom Cruise. James Yates says Miss Mosley was an important sculptor whose life and work should be remembered.
I'd love to have something more in Robe to memorialise her, because Bowden and Flinders busts are marvellous and sort of do that, but maybe another plaque there between them, sort of more commemorating what she did for Robe.
The co-owner of Magella Wines says tourists are still stopping at his cellar door on their way to the AFL's gather round in Adelaide this weekend, despite rising fuel prices. Brian Lynn was expecting a downturn in sales as tourists cancel plans or cut spending due to increased fuel prices across the country. Instead, he says visitation has been up and has sustained through an expected post-Easter slump.
Our takings at Celador are a little better than I thought. We had quite a good Easter given fuel prices and availability and stuff like that. We're quite happy. And certainly ever since for this week, it's been good.
The Executive Director of the Australian Dairy Products Federation says high fuel and fertiliser costs caused by the Iran war could result in dairy supply issues if the federal government does not intervene. According to dairy industry advocacy group East Oz Milk, the price of milk would need to rise around 30 cents per litre to cover transport and fertiliser costs, or supermarket shelves could start to empty. Janine Waller says she wants the dairy industry recognised as an essential service to help keep up supply.
This is where we need to be working together to understand what role we can play, what role government can play. We're already an industry where we've been going backwards in terms of milk production, so this would be of detriment to us, not only today but into the future.
After this, there is no turning back. You sip the red can, the story ends. You sip the black can, you enter dreamland. And I show you just how good the truth can taste. Take the Pepsi Max Taste Challenge.
In sport, the president of the Mid-South-East Football League says he doesn't expect fuel prices to change spectator behaviour ahead of the start of the 2026 season this weekend. Fuel prices in the Limestone Coast are averaging more than $2.20 a litre for unleaded and over $3 a litre for diesel. Peter Mitchell says player numbers across all divisions are looking strong, but only time will tell if it holds.
I think there'll be a lot more carpooling rather than going singly in a car. There might be going with 2 or 3 mates. We sort of anticipate there'll be a little bit more of that. At the end of the day, I think everyone will be just jumping out of their skin to make sure we get to the football and netball and start the season.
ABC News.
Yeah, give me that happy wash.
Scratch-free guarantee.
Make me feel like a limousine. Happy wash, happy car at OTR.